Hello and welcome to another episode on Indian history and culture. Today we are going to be having a very interesting topic to discuss, which is around there is an ocean named after India, right? So it's a huge thing, and that means it has been very strategic. There are only five oceans, and I don't think there is any other ocean which is named after a country. We probably have that credit that there is an ocean named after us. Why is that? And how is it very strategic to us, both not only from a trade perspective, but also politically? And we are going to discuss, and as well as from security perspective. So today we are going to be discussing the Indian Ocean. All right, so let's get started with our discussion today about Indian Ocean, right? So, and then for this discussion, I have two gentlemen. Both of them are from Indian Navy. I'm going to let them do their introduction rather than me botching up all their titles. So, I will pass on to Jagannath.
Hey guys, I'm Jagan and I'm a former naval officer. I retired in 2018. And during my tenure, I was mostly on board ships. I'm a gunnery and missile specialist. I have commanded a ship in Andaman and Nicobar, so I'm very aware of the littorals and island territories, and I've also had some amount of experience in looking at it from a strategic perspective when I was tenanting my last posting in Defense Services Staff College, Wellington. So that's about me. Over to you, GP.
Thanks for having me here. My name is Prakash Gopal. I've generally been called GP by my colleagues. So I left in 2018 July, and presently I'm doing my PhD in maritime security out of University of Wollongong in Australia. And my naval career was quite similar to Jagannath. I think the variety of exposures over the years was quite educative for me, and that's why I decided to take it to the next level and explore the more academic aspects of maritime security, which is what I hope to contribute to over this episode. Thanks.
Thanks for joining me, and we hope we're looking forward to a fantastic discussion. So let's get to Indian Ocean. So I think it is very important for us to understand what does this Indian Ocean contain. When we say Indian Ocean, what is its zone and what is its influence, and who are all part of that Indian Ocean kind of ecosystem? And then we will probably come to what does it mean for India.
I think there are two aspects in the answer to that question. One is the geographical extent of the ocean as such, which, as you know, stretches from, say, the east coast of Africa right up to the east coast of Australia. And on the north, it extends up to the Indonesian archipelago, and in the south, the Southern Ocean. But that is just the geographical limit. And there are certain very unique aspects about the Indian Ocean that make it really an important strategic space for the world. And that is the bulk of global economic growth is today happening amongst countries in the Indian Ocean region. Most of the oil production of the world, nearly 50% of oil production, happens in this region. It is the most populous oceanic region in the world. And it is probably the only ocean that is actually landlocked in a sense, because it's surrounded by land on the north, the east, west, and access to the ocean is restricted only through certain very narrow navigable straits, which are called, rightly so, choke points. So I think that is what differentiates the Indian Ocean region from other oceanic spaces like the Atlantic or the Pacific.
There are about 56 countries in the Indian Ocean region, and 36 out of them have access to the ocean directly, which is very important, right? It houses about 1/3 of world's population, with only about quarter of its land mass. It also holds about 65% of known reserves of raw materials within its geographic area, and 1/3 of the world's bulk cargo passes through it at any point of time. 50% of all container traffic in the world passes through Indian Ocean region, and most importantly, 2/3 of world's oil hydrocarbon traffic from sea at sea passes through Indian Ocean region. So that makes it very, very important as to, I mean, why we should be focusing here. And it's one of the most populous, but at the same time, it's not one of the most well-off nations which are in the Indian Ocean region. They're not the most wealthy. It's a hotbed of piracy, trafficking, and a lot of stuff, and which makes it all the more important for it to become a future flashpoint and become a destabilizing factor to the trade. So a lot of nations have focused their attention over here.
It looks like, number one, from the facts that you mentioned, Jagan, is that it's quite significant. Even though we have so many oceans, I think what's happening here is quite significant. There's a lot of traffic, a lot of countries who have stake in the ocean, and there is a lot of trade, a lot of piracy. There's way too much activity.
Yeah,
there, right. So
true.
I think that makes it very interesting. And let's talk about the choke point that earlier GP has brought about. What are these, and why are they called choke points?
Choke points are essentially vulnerable areas and vulnerable and narrow geographical spaces which provide you access to a larger space. For instance, in the case of the Indian Ocean, the access is provided into the Indian Ocean or out of the Indian Ocean only by the means of 6 choke points, which are essentially the Straits of Hormuz, the Gulf of Aden, Red Sea, Malacca Straits, the Cape of Good Hope, which is not exactly a strait but still has constrained sort of navigation, and the Sunda and Lombok Straits in the Indonesian archipelago. If you have to enter the Indian Ocean and exit, you have to pass through these very significantly narrow straits. What it implies from a strategic perspective is that because when you have a large amount of merchant traffic converging and passing through these narrow bodies, that makes them more vulnerable. Because if you have to hunt for somebody, these are the places where you would hunt for them because you're sure that they have to pass through one of these areas. And I think that is unique to the Indian Ocean because unlike other important oceans like the Atlantic and Pacific, which have got access from multiple and huge areas where, you can't possibly cover in terms of surveillance all the entries and exits into the Atlantic and the Pacific as you would be able to in the case of the Indian Ocean.
So who controls these choke points today? Like, you mentioned the 6 choke points. Which are these countries? I'm guessing those countries would be at a much more strategic, position to leverage and negotiate around security, isn't it?
But the beauty of the way the trade and economy functions on the ocean is that these straits belong to no one. Even though they pass through the backyards of countries, for instance, the Malacca Straits passes right through the territorial waters of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. But these countries don't own the straits, so they don't, legally speaking, they can't stop or prevent anyone from using these straits. Because in international law, they're recognized as straits for the purpose of navigation. And international maritime law allows you unimpeded passage for legitimate purposes through these straits.
I see, even though it's kind of touching your coastline.
Yes.
And on the other hand, if you have coastline touching, which is not a strait, then you can prevent people from passing through that. But if it is a strait, you cannot. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the Law of the Sea Convention, 1982, it lists down the straits that are recognized as straits for international navigation and permits the common usage of these straits.
But why are we then worried about the choke points if it has been agreed that you cannot prevent somebody from passing?
Let's say the US decides to add on to its economic sanctions of Iran and say go to war against suspected nuclear proliferation of Iran, and Iran then doesn't allow the passage of merchant vessels across the Straits of Hormuz because it is able to. At that point, it may not care for international law or abiding by conventions that it has signed on to. And incidentally, Iran is not even a signatory to the Law of the Sea Convention. So,
I see.
so because of the nature of international law, which is very weak in enforcement, it allows belligerent countries at times to be able to exercise undue authority. And that would make, in times of tension, that would put any ship that is transiting through those straits, it would make them vulnerable to possible attack.
Is there any choke points around India?
I would say that yes, Strait of Hormuz is very close to us, Gulf of Aden is very close to us, and Malacca is very, very close to us. Malacca literally is very close to us too, because just at the mouth of Malacca is at Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So it's geographically too is very close to us. But far more importantly is we need to always keep an eye on these straits, because whatever happens there is of immediate concern to us. We need to be very clear about that. Just a fact is, like, we 93% of our hydrocarbon requirement is being met from sea. Okay. So the fuel which you are all, like, we are all putting in our cars and bikes in our country is all coming from sea. So these straits are next to us. They are very, very important to us, number one. Number two is, like, there have been historic precedents when whatever has happened in these straits have affected us very severely. One case in point I can remember offhand is of tanker war, which happened during, Iran and Iraq war, wherein there was indiscriminate targeting of tankers at sea. And, it immediately has an impact on, one, the cost of the oil, two, insurance rates for tankers which go to sea shoots up. And these are big money. Like, you need to insure them. Now, the same thing happened with piracy. Now, how do pirates even track and, attack ships at sea? They wouldn't lie in wait for them in open sea, right? They would try to go and hit them where they know they can be found. And these are these straits where the density is pretty high, and it's a good opportunity for them to pick somebody off. So that is second thing. The third thing is terrorism. If a terrorist act has to happen, and if somebody wants to, disrupt the global trade and cause havoc, all he needs to do is target a very large crude carrier passing through the narrowest 1.5 mile stretch of Malacca Strait and sink it there. Can you imagine the chaos it would cause? So these are certain aspects which we all have a stake in, and India has a stake in this, and we need to be aware of this. We need to be conscious of this, and we need to focus on this. That's what
I think that makes sense. I think this is something that we don't fully understand, that how strategic water is and how strategic this particular place is. You guys have said that, look, there are 56 countries, which is almost like, 25-30% of the world's countries touch this particular body of water. And there are so many straits and constraints. And while we have free passage, any political upheaval in a particular country or unrest in a country could completely jeopardize the passage. If I were to ask another question, like there are 56 countries around this ocean, which country, if you have to name one, which country today exhibits the largest influence and control of Indian Ocean?
I would still say that India is, even today, in the best possible position to influence happenings in the Indian Ocean. But I must also caveat that by saying that it will not always remain the same if current trends are to continue. I think what works in India's advantage today is the mere geography of it. If you look at the way the Indian Ocean is shaped, and this is something that that isn't very obvious to us because of the way we look at maps and the globe. If you were to just invert the map of India, so that south faces up and north faces down, you would get an entirely different perspective of what India should be doing in the Indian Ocean region. And that is when it allows you to appreciate the immense advantage that geography has afforded to us. The Indian landmass juts about 2,000 miles into the Indian Ocean. And if you draw an arc with a radius of 1,000 miles from all points on Indian land, you'd cover over 50% of the Indian Ocean.
Is it? So wow, I didn't realize that. No wonder they call it Indian Ocean, but I didn't realize. Absolutely.
So if that is the immense advantage that geography has provided to us. But we have been late to the party in realizing and capitalizing on this advantage. And somehow we have remained constrained by a number of factors, such as more pressing threats from our land borders to the north, a continental mindset which has just been ingrained through the colonial period. And we are just starting to shake these things off, but we have lost a lot of time. And in the meantime, countries such as China have realized that they need to be able to play a more important role in the Indian Ocean. Because for China, the Indian Ocean is particularly important because of its economic status today. Bulk of its trade flows through the Indian Ocean. And if there were to be tensions between India and China, China does realize that all its trade is vulnerable to intervention by India in the Indian Ocean because it passes right across India's backyard. And it is working fast to make good on that vulnerability. And I think we aren't doing enough with adequate speed to be able to maintain our strategic supremacy over the Indian Ocean.
You see the actions India takes, like, if that is exactly now I would like everyone in the audience to now connect the dots here and see why, if there is a tsunami, Indian Navy rushes out to provide relief. Why, if there is a piracy, we are sending our ships there to ensure that nobody is affected and escorting the ships, international ships. Why is it that Indian Navy puts in a lot of effort in going around and policing these areas and ensuring that they are cleaned up? Is that we feel that it is our backyard and we are the net security provider, and these actions contribute towards that feeling of countries feeling that we are a net security provider, which is benign. These roles are all benign roles of Indian Navy. We've never been aggressive. We've always gone for cooperation with our neighbors in this area, as far as out as Seychelles and Mauritius, and as close as Bangladesh to Burma. There is a reason that this is called, in my opinion, the ocean is called Indian Ocean region. Is most of the people who entered into the Indian Ocean region had entered it seeking India. Right, so they entered these waters for a singular purpose, to go to India. I mean, it's like all lanes in the Indian Ocean region lead to India, right? So we are the predominant player in the region. Due to our past, due to our history, we need to shed our continental mindset, or at least water it down, and realize the potential Indian Ocean region provides us, especially in influencing affairs on land, which might not be immediately correlatable. There are nations with whom we have a lot of common interest in this area, whom we should take along, and then we should ensure that we become the predominant player in this region. I completely agree.
And then GP said we arrived at the party late. Well, what does it mean?
Our historic background has been that we looked at seas as potential routes for commerce and trade. We never used historically the seas as an expansionist mindset, as compared to, say, a nation like United Kingdom, an island nation whose whole survival was hinging on its ability to militarily defend its coastline. Right, like if not for that, somebody can just come and occupy their islands, right? So there's a very different mindset this provides us, and we were whilst we had some level of naval prowess within ourselves, but it was mostly restricted to protecting our trade routes and not to gain military superiority in the region. And I would say that mostly about all Asian nations too. That's been the same, even including China. They've never been a naval supreme power kind of a player. They were also continental in their mindset, but they had a lot of trade going on from their seas. They have a huge coastline too.
So it's very interesting. Like, for example, if you were to look at it, the waters around Europe, I'm talking about 400, 500 years back, waters around Europe was used very differently. There was major wars going on, fights going on. around
Yes.
Mediterranean, around Atlantic, and all the coast. Whereas you are saying that in India, in Indian Ocean side, both with two big countries that are in question like China and India, we never looked at waters from a military perspective. We looked at waters from a trade and commerce perspective, but we never built that naval supremacy primarily on the water side. We had major land armies, but not naval fleets. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think the way history progressed was different in the European and the Mediterranean side, but on the Asian side it progressed very differently, particularly when it comes to waters?
The whole game changed in the late 15th and early 16th century. Let's go back and see. They were and it's very surprising. If you look at the years and the dates, few events happened in a span of 20-30 years, which had a major impact on the way the world we see right now in front of us. First is let's look at when did Vasco da Gama come to India. It was in 1498, right? At the same time, 1492, I think Columbus landed in America, right? 1519, between 1519 and 1522, Cortez annexed Mexico in the name of Spain. So the new world started opening up, right? This is a time when multiple European nations were vying to establish their colonies and expand their territories. Now, this required, one, their ability to traverse through blue waters, two, their ability to defend themselves against other nations in Europe who were trying to usurp their influence in these areas. Like, Spanish had a requirement of protecting their entire, trade or communication between the New World and from their mainland, from Europe. England had an interest that Spain was rapidly becoming rich, so it needed to go and interdict this. So it needed to raise its potential and maritime supremacy in the region. Then Portuguese came in, and then Dutch came in. So this century, like that late 15th to early 16th century and towards 17th century, is when the game changed. This rapid militarization of sea trade, which happened in my opinion in the late 15th and early 16th and towards 17th centuries, we got left behind in this thing. Over to you, GP.
So if you look at the history of pre-colonial invasions of India, all invaders came across from the north, whether it was the Mongols, the Turks, the Arabs, the Mughals, everyone came from across the north until the Vasco da Gama and thereafter the British landed up on our shores. So all our pre-colonial invaders came from the north, they settled. So like for instance the Mughals, because they came in from the north, they felt that was the area that was most vulnerable to defend their empire, and therefore they focused all their energies up north and northwest as well. They never thought of building a navy till pretty late in the dynasty. Like I think Aurangzeb was the first to realize that there was merit in having a navy in the first place. So I think it starts right from there. Our only expansionist venture was by means of a sea and not on land. So that was the Chola Empire when he defeated the Srivijaya Empire of Southeast Asia and went across to Indonesia, and that's why you see Ram and Ramayana in full flow in Indonesia and Malaysia. And that was really India's only expansionist venture, which happened across the sea.
What happened? Why did we? I think that was fruitful, isn't it? Or was it not seen as fruitful venture during the time? Why did we stop? Why did we kind of retract? Right. So what happened there?
Maritime ventures are expensive, okay, and they have a technological requirements, certain threshold of engineering, technology, manufacturing has to all come together for you to have large expeditions at sea. Unlike continental enterprises of raids or some things which happen. So they have certain engineering and technology thresholds, and these can only be achieved when it becomes a national effort and not a subsidiary of your other enterprises. So that gives advantage, huge amount of advantage to nations like England, which put their entire might behind their maritime ventures, being an island nation. So that's one thing. And as long as Chola Empire thrived, their maritime prowess thrived. But along with its decline, they too, the influence also declined eventually.
We did take a strategic view. Maybe we took a more inward commerce view. Maybe, but definitely we were watching out much more closely on our land borders compared to our water, shores. So that kind of created, and when the whole, the trade became political in the 15th, 16th century, it showed the lopsidedness of our strength, right? So because they came, as most of the people who came to via water came for trade, but it became political, during the 16th, 17th century, and I don't think we handled that better. So that's one narrative. I would leave it as narrative than fact. Coming to what GP said, he said we can't lose any more time. Why? I mean, who are we in a race with at this time on the Indian Ocean?
To me, it's quite clear. It's essentially China. And I say this not only from a very defensive point of view, that we need to do this to defend against China. I also mean it in the sense that I don't want to undermine the challenges we face on our land borders. That is a serious threat, and it deserves our primary attention. Even as a naval officer, I do not begrudge the fact that we have to have our eyes and ears open along our land borders. But what I would like to posit, like what many people involved with the maritime evolution of India's thought would like to say, is that the only answer to our dangers that come from across the land borders do not lie only on the land. We can answer those challenges, we can reply or respond to those challenges in other domains, including the maritime domain, where we have a significant advantage. And I think that is an opportunity waiting to be grabbed, in the sense that there are pressure points that we can apply in the maritime space that China would respond to in its behavior on the land border. And we need to be able to develop the capability to leverage those pressure points, to be able to apply those when we need, and so as to compel good behavior on the part of whoever is causing us problems wherever. So
very interesting. So you're saying that the Indian Ocean can serve us strategically more than pure militarily. So we need to start leveraging this advantage that we have, given that we, like you said, 50% of Indian Ocean is when you draw a arc, it's in our vicinity. So we need to use this strategically so that we can create a leverage somewhere else, right? So
absolutely,
very interesting point. Very interesting point.
And that's not only militarily. I mean, there are elements of national power, diplomacy with Indian Ocean states, winning their hearts and minds of the small island countries that lie in the Indian Ocean close to us. So we have to be active diplomatically, militarily, economically, across all these dimensions to be able to create the right amount of leverage in the region.
Look at it. You look around you. What gives the only superpower in the world the ability to say that it's a superpower? Is it US Army? Is it US Air Force? Or is it US Navy? I mean, I will just say this. Whilst I wouldn't literally draw a parallel and I say that we need to become like US Navy because they're more expeditionary in nature, because as a global superpower they need to be there in many places and exert their influence and maybe keep things stabilized, as what they would call. But the reason is that it's very clear that your ability to influence Navy gives you the ability to influence affairs far beyond your immediate vicinity and prevent affairs far beyond your vicinity in influencing things happening in your home. Both ways. It can prevent things which are happening far beyond vicinity, like say in South China Sea, from influencing you. At the same time, it allows you to influence affairs in South China Sea in future, and and play a role there. And let's be frank, the country in which GP right now is a maritime neighbor of our nation. There's a straight line I can draw from India to Australia, right? And freedom of navigation is a very beautiful thing. You can literally go 12 nautical miles into any other nation and sit there, and there isn't much people can do about it. So this is the power and the reach. Navy has always been and will be a strategic influencer, which will play a role at a strategic level, and we need to start looking at it that way and developing an ability to exercise this instrument of national policy. Eventually, all these are instruments of national policy, right? We need to start to learn to use them as an instrument of national policy in our future.
Very interesting point. In fact, I never thought about it until you just mentioned, which is that which of the three, like Army, Air, and Water, the Navy, really gives you that leverage, right? So, and you're right, because the water is where a lot of international routes are. So you could be sitting in one end of the globe and you could go all the way to the other end of the globe unimpeded. Whereas you can't do that on the land. You have to cross through borders, which is locked, right?
True.
You can't do that through air also, right? So water is very strategic from that angle, that you can influence and put pressure as well as balance and do everything on the water more than anywhere else. So it's a very interesting thought. Any closing comments, GP?
There was a very interesting anecdote that one of my mentors earlier used to quote. He was Admiral Chauhan, who's still the director of National Maritime Foundation. And he used to say that the sea is the only place where if you're on a warship and you met another warship of another country, you'll exchange pleasantries and continue on your own way. But if you're in the Army or the Air Force and you were to see an opposing Army's soldier or an opposing Air Force's fighter plane, it would set off alarm bells, So the sea is strategic in that sense that it belongs to everyone, and it doesn't allow itself to ownership of one single person. It is not territorial at all.
It's shared. It is shared. Therefore, it can also play a more strategic role in diplomacy, right? So I guess
absolutely
you can, if there is one defense force meeting another different force and still, exchanging diplomatic, relationship, you're saying that's only at sea. It cannot happen on land or.
Yep.
Okay. That's a very interesting point. Very interesting point. So as in conclusion, I think one of the things that I learned today is that number one, sea is a lot more strategic. Water, I would say water, not just sea and ocean, but water is a lot more strategic. It gives you a lot more instruments for influencing the region. You can use it to, influence the land borders and your other areas of diplomacy as well. You not just trade, not just military, economic, everything else. And if you were to particularly come to India, we have an opportunity. I don't think any other country, like you guys mentioned, has such good, beautiful opportunity to influence such a large region because of geographic position where India is. I really love the point that you said about invert the map and you will see how dominating can we be or influential can we be in this particular region. That unfortunately, in our minds, I think the land borders are a lot more kind of, on top of our mind than the sea borders, and which is rightfully so. What we are saying is that's not misplaced priority. However, we should actually look at sea as a lot more in a strategic manner that can help us manage even in our land borders. So I think that's the interesting point, and the outlook has to change from that angle. If you really want to aspire to be to take a position of leadership in this particular region, which by the way is a very large region, like Jagan mentioned earlier about the amount of trade that happens and the amount of countries it touches. So with that, thank you very much. Wonderful session, very useful and informative. And I hope to catch you guys soon in maybe in another episode that we do over how water became from trade to political instrument, right? So I think that deserves an episode by itself, maybe another time. But thank you very much for joining me today, and viewers, thanks for being with us, and hope you enjoyed this session. I'll catch you in the next episode.